Hey everybody, welcome back to Gun Totin' Minnesotan. My name is Andrew, and today I'm going to be talking you through this product right here, which is the TOXIN 3-18x50 illuminated reticle, which is placed in the first focal plane. This is brought by Telson Optics. This is a new optics company, not just to me, to everyone. I'm really excited about some of the offerings we're going to be seeing from Telson, but today I'm focusing on the 3-18, as I said. Briefly going over some more of the stats and specs here, you're going to see that this optic has roughly 19.5 usable mils. It does have a second turn or second revolution indicator on top. There are 10 mils per revolution. When it comes to the windage, advertised windage was 39 mils. Advertised elevation is 39 mils. That's going to be reduced for elevation because of that zero stop and revolution indicator style. The parallax does go down to 15 yards, and the turrets turn in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction rather. The travel per rotation is 10 mils, or if you go with the MOA version of this, it's going to be 25 MOA. The eye relief is 3.4 inches, and the tube size is a 30 millimeter. It's only 13.69 inches long, and catch this, the weight is only 30.4 ounces. A few more stats that caught my attention. It's advertised with Japanese apochromatic plus ED glass with a 99.8% light transmission. These new proprietary lenses are called UHD. They're fully multi-coated lenses, of course. There are enhanced stainless steel turrets, so it's not brass underneath, it's stainless steel, which they're advertising as competition capable and certainly hunting capable. Of course, it has the zero stop and second revolution indicator, which is going to be a big deal for some competition shooters as well. It has razorback knurling, which is a unique kind of texture I have not seen on other optics. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. It's 100% sealed dry with argon purging for all conditions. It is waterproof, rated to IP67. And one more thing I thought was pretty impressive, the shock testing is tested not to 1,000, not to 1,100, but actually up to 1,200 Gs of force, which is very, very high. It's precision constructed and assembled and calibrated in a static-free, clean room to get superior reliability and just clean lenses and all that. It does come with an ARD shade or sunshade, and if you wanted to, you could purchase some Tenebrex caps for this optic, which I highly recommend. You're going to see Tenebrex caps on this optic as I'm shooting it here, and those are available for aftermarket support for this particular optic and the size lens and objective diameters. Now, to begin with, I want to do something that is a little different for me in my channel. I want to start by comparing the TOXIN versus some other common 3-18s that I've seen, either I've reviewed or I've shot on other friends' rifles, and I've had a chance to actually look through a decent amount and get a good, strong opinion of the optics so I can compare them. And this is going to be not a totally conclusive comparison. I don't have enough time with the TOXIN to explain all of the benefits or all the drawbacks. I'm just trying to give you a general feel of what I've got so far in comparison to some of the competition. Starting off, I'm going to start with the Riton 3-18 X7 series. That's a really strong scope, and it has some great features, but I think it actually lacks in the reticle design. The TOXIN has a very strong reticle. I'm going to talk about that later in the video. I think it blows the Riton out of the water. That is just my honest opinion. The Riton scopes are not bad scopes, and it's not a bad company. I just don't think they can compete with the reticle options, and I see the TOXIN as having a very future-minded reticle, and I'll get to that probably in the next portion of the video, talk more about the reticle and why I think it's good for hunting and competition use both. The primary arms 3-18. That optic is not even close when it comes to features, functionality, tracking, or image quality. It is a little bit cheaper, but it's just not even close. The Redwin 3-18 I reviewed a while back. They're not in the same class. You're not going to see in those cheaper optics the image quality. Not even close. You're not going to see image quality or tracking quality that you're going to see in a product like the TOXIN from Telson. This has stainless steel internals, and it's a big deal because it's very repeatable and the tracking is great. It's another issue I had with the Bushnell 3-18. The new Bushnell 3-18 is using some similar design features, but it is not the same, and I have to say the image just doesn't come out to be quite as sharp. I don't think the colors are quite as true on the Bushnell 3-18. That's my opinion. I'm just not super impressed with that 3-18 version. It is going to be cheaper, but I'm not sure that it's worth it compared to the Bushnell. I would still end up with a TOXIN 10 times out of 10. The Zeiss 3-18 from their S5 series. Now that is a very, very nice configuration optic. It's got German glass. I think it's a wonderful image, and it is going to be probably a little sharper than you're going to see on the Telson. And the price is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 to $2,000 more. So a person has to ask themselves, do they need $2,000 more in performance of glass, or can the Japanese glass get there for them? And my answer for myself is yes. The Japanese glass is incredibly close to the German glass right now. They're closing the gap every year more and more. And when I see that the repeatability of the turrets and the function of the features is very good, the weight isn't bad, I'm going to lean towards the Telson once again. Not to mention the Zeiss 3-18 has some very large turrets which aren't great for, I would say, hunting and field of view. Now that I think of it, also the zero stop method and setting your zero is a little complicated on the Zeiss S5, whereas it's very simple on the Telson optics. Now I need to speed up a little bit. I'm probably going to take too long with all this. I just want to give you an idea why this stands apart from other optics. The Element Optics Titan 3-18, really good, or really great reticle, I'm actually going to say. I like the reticle quite a bit. But the turrets are now outdated and the glass is not going to hold up. It's a little cheaper, but I think the glass is considerably different between the two optics. And I'm just going to say I think the Element Nexus line is a little bit more comparable when it comes to glass, yet the Telson probably has a little bit more to offer for internal elevation versus the Nexus in overall range. But then in practical range, I think the Nexus actually probably has a little more for that usable amount when the zero stop is installed. So it's kind of back and forth there a little bit. Leupold Mark 6 3-18 by 44 only has a 44mm objective. In my personal opinion, the reticle options for Leupold are still not quite there, and I think the image is a little bit too dull. Could have something to do with that 44mm objective, and the price just doesn't justify for the Mark 6 in my opinion. Trijicon 10 mile 3-18 image is okay. Reticles are not preferred. Only has 17 mils of internal E as I see it advertised, and that's just not even close to competitive with the Telson. Overall, there's going to be quite a bit more available. The Steiner T6, that 3-18 by 56 is a really good optic. Some decent reticle options available, but I'm going to say it's kind of heavy and it's very large, and so for hunting it almost disqualifies itself. It's just a little bit too big overall. Vortex has some 3-18s and they're not in the same class. In addition to not being in the same class, they also don't have reticles that I think are going to stand out or be as good as the Telson optics because of the boldness and thickness of stadia and the ability to use it on lower powers as well as higher powers. This is just a better hunting and precision rifle scope in my opinion. The Frontier 34mm, so many of these optics I'm going back and forth between 30mm and 34mm. I know that's not directly comparable, but if you're looking for a 3-18, you might consider a 34mm. The reason I'm going to lean away from that optic, it's going to be a little bit heavier, I believe. Some internal travel that's pretty remarkable actually in the Frontier optic, but I just don't think the reticle illumination makes any sense. I would rather have a better superior center dot and illumination that I see with the Telson optics. And when I look at the Frontier 3-18 from Hawk Optics, I also noticed that the wind leads and dots cover up quite a bit of the target, so it's a reticle thing once again. And lastly, I'll just finish with this even though I have a list of more. The US Optics, it's the same old story. 34mm tube instead of a 30mm tube. It's probably a little heavier. I think it has an inferior reticle option. And when you look at all of these optics I've described, many of them are great optics, very, very good optics. But if you're looking at something that could just be really great at hunting and competition, and is probably going to be the best balance for weight ratio and price comparison, and then features that work, I think this is going to be superior to most or almost all the options I was able to come up with. Certainly if price is compared to some of those upper end optics, the price point is competitive. The features are competitive. The function is competitive. And I think many of the other optics lack, especially in reticle design. So that's just my best attempt to quickly summarize that. If I was allowed to, I could probably go an hour or two comparing this optic versus all those other scopes and why I think this one is superior to those options. But that's going to be up to you to do your research. Now let's shoot the thing a little bit more. All right, I'm going to do a little shooting here at a little past 200 yards. It's really cold, and I've been testing out all the functions. The caps still work. They haven't broke. These Tenebrex caps are awesome. They're very, very strong, and I like them for that reason, that they're winter qualified. The turrets themselves are still clicking just like they should. They feel pretty much the same as when you're in like a 50, 60 degree environment, 70 degree environment. And at zero, a lot of times things sludge up on you or get slow or sticky. The parallax is still just as smooth. So that's a good sign. If it can work this way in the extreme cold, it probably works that way in the extreme heat, and it's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not all crunchy or grimy or gritty. Illumination still works just fine, and the magnification ring is still moving. A lot of times these freeze up completely. They'll completely seize up on you in sub-zero temperatures. In general, it's not quite sub-zero. It's actually like -1 right now. But usually these freeze up on you, and that one seems to be doing just fine for my standards, for sure. A lot of times when it's cold, I leave it at about 12 power anyways. But I can bump it up, and it's working fine. So I'm going to shoot on this rooftop here, a little past 200, and just give it a few shots in low light to see what I think of the image quality. It is cold enough that my battery is going to die really fast on that camera. So I'll do a few shots here, and then that'll probably have to be like the last that I have for today, because that's just, it's not going to last. Now I should go over some of the features really briefly here. The diopter adjustment is non-locking, as far as I can tell. Very smooth in function, has an appropriate amount of texture all the way around. This texture is going to be uniform with the other dials and functions on the optic. And it's a really nice one. I've never seen this design on any optic ever. I've seen so many variations of basically the same texturing. I've never seen this one before, and this is my favorite. This is definitely my favorite. I think it's really cool looking, but functionally, it somehow is aggressive texture without being something that chews up your hands. Yeah, it's just milled well. It looks very refined. I like that. That's a very small nuance, I'm sure, for most of us, but I'm going to tell you that the diopter adjustment works fine. For me and my eye, the way I set it, it was basically most of the way to the right. That's just for me and my eye. You can look up some articles online about how to set up a diopter properly for your eye, because it does matter. Don't skimp on that. Set it up properly so that reticle is sharp for you. Moving on to the magnification lever here. This one has a very unique design. There's basically Allens, or two, I'm not sure if it's 2 Allens or 1 Allen, that goes all the way through to retain this diamond shape on top, but it's rock solid. This is installed well, it's not going anywhere. I have had on some other brands detachable magnification assist levers break off on certain brands of scopes. This one doesn't look like it's ever going to break off. This is a very rigid, strong attachment. I suppose it's removable if you really needed it to, but I would leave it on. Personally, it doesn't look like it's going to get in the way of my bolt. Even if I go to 3 power and I've got this big extended bolt, it just barely runs into that. Most people are not running a bolt that size in the location I am. If I'm even on, let's say 3.5 power, it clears it fine. Even less than that probably. So if you have a really oversized bolt, if you're one of the 5 people who runs a huge ginormous bolt, it might be something to consider. Most of you are going to be just fine. Most modern rifles are designed in a way to facilitate that kind of thing, or they have less of a bolt throw. This one from this old Savage Model 10 does have their tactical handle on here, and it's just a really big bolt. No offense to Savage at all, it's just really big. And obviously, moving the other side, it's not going to run into anything. It's not going to block your view of either your bubble level, your parallax wheel, or your illumination settings. So I like how they did it. The smoothness is pretty good. It's actually a little bit below freezing right now. It's really foggy though, so I think it's going to warm up. And minor resistance, it's not bad at all. It's nothing I would complain about. I've had smoother magnification rings in the sense that they were, just easy to navigate back and forth. That's not always a good sign. Sometimes in really sloppy optics that are put together poorly, there's a little slop in this mechanism right here, the ring, or in the eyepiece, in the connection here, and there's actually like slop. So it's not necessarily a good thing to have a magnification lever or a diopter that are just, loose, basically. Silky smooth is fine, and this is silky smooth. Just takes a little bit of effort to move it, but it's a reasonable amount. And the reason I comment on that is because I shoot in the cold very often, and I have run this in sub-zero temperatures, in the negatives, and it still ran the same way, which is what I'm concerned with. It's consistent, it works good, well done. From 3 to 18, it's not a huge throw, but it's enough. Going back and forth there. Most of the time, the life of this optic, I would be spending it probably between 8 power, maybe 16 power. Not because it's unusable at the higher end, just because of the way that I shoot at targets and what I like for field of view. It's usually going to be right in there. I didn't find it to block any of my necessary items right in here on the left side. Zooming in for a second, you can see the turret. I'm familiar with these style turrets, and I am a fan. Generally, these have really, really good internals. I think these are stainless steel, if I remember right. And they feel good. The clicks are positive. They're not really chunky, choppy turrets. They're more clicky. And they're defined. The clicks are defined. I can tell between each click. I can feel it as well as hear it, which is an important thing. Something cool that you're going to see on these turrets, it's going to be a second revolution indicator. So I've zoomed in a little bit for a reason, because I want you to be able to see when this red pops up right there. Now on some designs, their second revolution indicator, not this one, but other designs, the revolution indicator might be silver, might be black, and it hardly pops up at all, where you could hardly feel it. And you certainly would have trouble seeing it. This one, it's red, and it's very apparent when you're in your second revolution. Speaking of revolutions, this is 10 mils per revolution, which is a good standard to run by, and I'm getting about 19.5, 19.6 mils of usable elevation when it's mounted and zeroed up. And I have my zero installed with this. It's a very simple process to set your zero on this type of optic. You're going to remove those Allens, you're going to lift it up, move it over to your zero, and then tighten them down, and just give it a test function that it stops on the zero stop, and that it dials the correct position. It's basically just going to come down to a little metal or aluminum arrow inside. It has kind of a notch in it, and you want to just make sure you don't monkey with that and flip it the wrong direction, but it's pretty much stupid easy to run, and these turrets are reliable. They're sensitive in the way that I don't have to exert a huge amount of force into the turrets, but they're not going to move on their own, I don't think. So I'm a happy camper when it comes to the turrets. Non-locking windage, that's not a big deal for me. On especially competition scopes, I'm not terribly worried about bumping that, and I do check my zero or my windage regularly. So I don't think that's going to be an area of conflict for you. You do have your witness marks there, so you can tell if you're lined up on zero. Now regarding that witness mark, it's always a big deal to me. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit. It's a big deal to me if the line lines up exactly. And on my particular model that I'm looking at here, it lines up exactly. And I like the way they did this. So if you can see, there's a graduation from 0 up to ½ mil right here. Let's turn that towards you. From 0 to ½ mil, the graduation goes up to you're at that 0.5 mil and then back down again for 6. It's just nice to be able to break up those smaller numbers in increments on those 10th mil indicators, because when you're in a match and you're trying to see if you're on 10.4, 10.5, if you have very small lines and there's no graduation or increasing of the lines, sometimes under stress, I have found myself to get the number wrong. And that's frustrating when you have a miss that was not due to trigger pull or ammo or bad position, but it was actually due to you reading your turret wrong. That really sucks. So you're not going to have that issue with this because the graduation makes it very clear and the line lines up with the witness mark. So well done on the turrets. Obviously, the parallax wheel is incredibly important, and this one is, again, just like the magnification lever, very, very smooth, but not heavy, not hard to push around. Something I want to give kudos to Telson about is that the parallax goes down to 15 yards. I'm seeing more and more of the high-end and very high-quality optics using at least a 15-yard, maybe even a 10-yard from time to time parallax distance for their minimums. And when it comes to a 3 to 18 and the thinking behind a 3 to 18, this makes a lot of sense. I can run it on 3 power, which is very, very low, and I can get a huge field of view. I can also have clarity for those really close deer shots, buck shots. I know that in tactical applications, folks do talk about a near parallax being incredibly important, and then additionally a functional illumination. And this illumination is functional. Low light settings is where I found it to be the most beneficial. The dial is very tactile, really clicky, positive, runs on a standard 2032. The battery access compartment is easy to get into and lock up, and I have not had interference where when I dial this, it loosens the cap. On some brands of optics, it is a frustration for me where I'll dial the illumination knob, and sometimes on those optics it's real gummy. It might affect the parallax. They might not move independently of each other very well, or your fingers run into things. And then also I've had battery cap compartments come loose as I'm going through illumination settings, and that's just frustrating. I don't want to have to monkey around with all this. So well done to Telson, making sure that these are very independent of each other. I'm not having conflict where I'm mashing into one another and one's moving the other, nor am I having so much illumination in the reticle that it's bleeding badly, or it's not the whole Christmas tree. That's something really done well, which I'll talk about reticle in a little bit. The reticle is not illuminated completely all the way down the tree. Just kind of a personal preference thing, I'm sure, but I don't like the tree being totally illuminated. So this whole section right here, done really well. You see there's no numerical indicators for yards or distances, and that doesn't matter. That's not a big deal, but it does go up to infinity, and you have some reference points here if you want to write something in, if that's important to you. For me, I've actually found that it's just not important to have reference numbers on there. I will very quickly find the focus during a match without having a number to dial it to. I just can trust my eye as I'm looking through it. It's getting really foggy. It's probably going to limit how much I can do here today, but we'll give it a whirl. This is the fourth time I've tried to come out to record, and it has been foggy every time. And actually, just as I was shooting now, the fog has set in so heavy that it's going to be hard to see my targets even at 630. I'm not going to be able to film 1030 for this review, but I do have more stuff from Telson coming out in the next couple months, some really cool releases that they're going to have, and I plan on showing you a lot more of that when I have it in hand. I actually have to send this scope back to my friend Trent, and he's going to have this at SHOT Show so people can take a look at it. I need to get this shipped out to him relatively soon. Well, this is kind of unfortunate. In the last couple minutes, such a heavy fog set in that I can't see 45 yards over there very well, where it's lower, and ahead of me I can't see 100 yards. On the higher spot I can see, but I don't think I would even drive in that. So here's the deal. I'm going to talk about the reticle. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen, and I think, let's see, I'll put the picture up let's put it over here. I'll put the picture up right here so you can look at the reticle while I talk about it. I'm going to be kind of brief, but I want to tell you what I like about it, what I think you would like about it, and why this is probably just a generally good reticle for hunters and target shooters or competition shooters. Starting off at 3 power. At 3 power, yes, the reticle is very small and fine, but because the subtensions are thicker on this in a good way, that's not a bad thing. The subtensions are a little thicker, you can still kind of use it, especially if you have the parallax dialed into that 15 yards, you're shooting something very close like I do with rodents and small critters. Yeah, you could use that reticle, and if it's dull out, if it's kind of dim, I would throw on some illumination, and actually the contrast is pretty good. Now, a quick note about illumination and the reticle. The first 3 mils are what's illuminated and the center dot. I think that's the way to go. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't prefer full Christmas trees being illuminated for reticles. I'm not sure what the value would be. There's only probably 2 or 3 times I've ever used an illuminated reticle in a lower half, and it was just messing around having some fun. Practically speaking, I really don't think it has a lot of value to illuminate all the way down, not to mention it's usually done poorly. It bleeds. There's only a couple optics that do it really, really well. And for my uses, and probably most of your uses, I think the center of the reticle, at least those first couple or 3 mils, is what makes a lot of sense. So what you're going to see in the reticle is pretty much some thick bars on the sides. You have your horizontal lines and then a thick bottom stadia, and that draws your eye to the center and does a good job. I'm going to move up to 6 power, skipping a little bit. At 6 power, very functional. I can read those numbers. This is what's impressive. Most of the time on certain brands of optics, it's just common in precision optics nowadays, even on 6 power, they're so dang hard to see. And I can't make out what the subtensions are. I can't make up what the differences are. Sometimes I can't even read the numbers because the print and the font is so small. These subtensions are bold enough and thick enough, and I can't get over it. I can't say it enough times. This is a winning design for me. 6 power is usable. 8 power, I'm going to use 8 power a lot, probably in hunting when I want good field of view. This optic has pretty decent field of view and light collection. Moving up to, let's see, yeah, I'm right on 10 power right now. 10 power is phenomenal. The contrast and the execution on this reticle is so nice. On 10 power, now right at the moment I can't see beyond 25 yards ahead of me, but before when I was shooting earlier today, on 10 power, I feel like it's a huge field of view, or at least it's competitive, a pretty good field of view, and the reticle does not cover up too much of the target. And what I mean by that is now I'm going to be able to start talking about the center dot and the portion around the center dot. There's a nice area to breathe there, and that's a big deal to me because I want 2 things that seem counter, but they're not. I want a center dot that's big enough, at least 0.05 or 0.05 up to maybe 1/10 of a mil, somewhere around there. I want a reticle of that size because I find it doesn't really block my targets, and I can contrast better on black targets like I was earlier today. This one has a large enough stadia in general, the thickness, the boldness, and the subtension values of those lines is enough that I can kind of favor, I can see where I'm at, I can hold really quickly, like I can find that dot really quickly against a dull gray target, which is the battle in kind of what I do, which is shooting sports, but also with animals. Shooting a gray squirrel towards sundown, I'll probably use some illumination, but having a big enough center dot is a big deal. And then at the same time, I want room to breathe around that. And so there's some breakup there up to the 0.5 mil marker around number 1 in each direction, vertically and horizontally. So they've accomplished, it's not impossible, but they've accomplished something that is just not common. A lot of reticles don't have that much room to breathe, and they don't have enough contrast, and they struggle with one end or another. I think this is pretty competent and does a good job of making both work. The values of these subtensions, I don't even need to look at a subtension guide or anything like that. Just for the most part, it really makes a lot of sense. If you've been in shooting sports for any amount of time, I think you're going to look at this and very quickly be able to analyze and see what the values are and just know offhand. It's so second nature, and the fact that they're a little bit thicker helps a lot. I don't believe that these lines cover up too much of the targets. And when I'm getting into the tree is the first 10 mils, as you can see there, and the first 10 mils makes a lot of sense. I like to have indicators down the stem of the vertical stadia. This has an indicator at 15, and technically those little holes appear to line up as well with certain mil markers. Now, I'm not sure that I'll be using those holes in there. I'd like to try in the future. I have to send the scope back, like I said. But in the future, I'd like to try that out and see if on higher power, I can actually place my target in there, perhaps with 22 at extreme long range. Perhaps I can place my target in those holes at longer distances and use it for a more precise hold. That's a possibility. But even then, just having a 15 mil marker on the stem is really nice. And for me, it's a good touch. I pretty much demand it in all the scopes that I personally own or keep. This one has that. And then 10 mils with the tree reduced down after that, which makes a lot of sense. Most of us just don't need the tree past the 10 mils. It's about as functional as it gets. And I think a lot of optics companies are going back that direction because they want more field of view or less blockage of field of view in the lower portions down around the kind of the bottom half of your glass. If glass isn't done really well, and this has pretty decent glass, I would say overall this is like a really nice piece of Japanese glass. It's very competitive with everything else that's Japanese made from my eye. But I would say what you're going to see with poor quality glass is that those extended stadia that go down in the Christmas trees, the distortions are just kind of obnoxious. They're really distracting, actually, and you can't use them quite as much as you would hope to. I've tried for years. I've tried to use poor quality glass and extended reticles, and most of the time by about 10, 15 mils, somewhere in there, that's the most you can use in poor quality glass before it's just so distorted or ugly, or there's something about it that doesn't make sense, and or it doesn't even line up. Perhaps sometimes the stadia are actually off with distortions. With this going just to 10 mils and then having a 15th mil marker down there, it makes a lot of sense. And I think almost everybody, hunters, definitely hunters could get into this. I would say competition shooters and maybe people who just like to punch paper, you're all going to do really well with an optic like this and a reticle like that. Well, it's about time for me to wrap up this video. Thank you to Telson for sending out the TOXIN 38018 for me to try out. I'm really looking forward actually to the rest of the product line, what they have to offer. This is unique, especially the reticle. It's got fantastic internals with the stainless steel. It's trustworthy. I think the design makes a lot of sense. It's a very good NRL Hunter optic. I think this is actually more competitive than almost all the other 38018s out there for NRL Hunter specifically. I like the features. I like the design and the thought that went into it. It's probably because I'm meshing so well with that reticle. It just fits me really, really good. But I'm going to say overall, I think most hunters and even precision rifle shooters who are shooting something similar to what I am here, a rifle that can do both. It can do some hunting, it can do some competition. This is an excellent option for you, and keep your eyes on Telson optics. When I get back from SHOT Show, I believe I'll have my own model coming back with me, or maybe in the next couple months I'll have a model, maybe a new model, to try out and show you what else they have. I have seen their product manual and I'm very interested in what's coming down the line. Keep your eyes on them and comment down below if you have any questions or thoughts about the product, the optic, maybe some of the things that I said about the reticle and why I think this is a superior optic. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. My fingers are so cold. Woo! Okay.